The year was 1861. The United States, a young nation founded on ideals of liberty and equality, found itself teetering on the brink of a devastating internal conflict. The issue at the heart of this impending crisis was slavery. For decades, the enslavement of African Americans had been a source of deep moral and political division between the North and the South. The North, with its burgeoning industrial economy, had largely moved away from slavery. Many Northerners viewed the institution as inherently unjust and incompatible with the principles of freedom upon which the nation was founded. The South, in contrast, remained deeply reliant on slave labor for its agricultural economy, particularly the production of cotton, a crop that fueled textile mills in both America and Europe. Southern society was structured around the institution of slavery, with wealthy plantation owners wielding significant political and economic power. As the nation expanded westward, the question of whether slavery should be allowed in new territories became increasingly contentious. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 attempted to maintain a balance between slave and free states, but it proved to be a fragile truce. The debate over slavery was not simply an economic or political one. It was a fundamental question of human rights and dignity. Abolitionists, primarily in the North, condemned slavery as a moral abomination. They argued that all people, regardless of race, were created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Frederick Douglass, a former slave who became a prominent abolitionist speaker and writer, eloquently articulated the plight of enslaved people, stating, "I have found that, to make a contented slave, it is necessary to make a thoughtless one. It is necessary to darken his moral and mental vision, and as far as possible to annihilate the power of reason." In the South, however, many people defended slavery as a necessary evil or even a positive good. They argued that it was sanctioned by the Bible and that it provided economic and social stability. Some slave owners claimed to treat their slaves with kindness and paternalism, but the brutal realities of slavery, including forced labor, family separation, and physical and sexual abuse, could not be ignored. Harriet Tubman, a courageous conductor on the Underground Railroad, risked her life repeatedly to guide enslaved people to freedom in the North. Her actions, along with those of countless other abolitionists, both black and white, demonstrated the unwavering commitment to ending slavery in America. Intertwined with the debate over slavery was the issue of states' rights. Southerners argued that individual states had the right to govern themselves, and that the federal government should not interfere in their domestic institutions, including slavery. They believed that the Constitution was a compact among sovereign states, and that states had the right to secede from the Union if they felt their rights were being violated. The Compromise of 1850, brokered by Senator Henry Clay, was another attempt to avert disunion. It admitted California as a free state, but also strengthened the Fugitive Slave Act, which required citizens in free states to assist in the capture of runaway slaves. This controversial law further inflamed tensions between the North and the South. The publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel in 1852 had a profound impact on public opinion. The book, which depicted the horrors of slavery in vivid detail, became a bestseller in the North and further galvanized the abolitionist movement. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for popular sovereignty, the right of citizens to vote on whether slavery would be allowed in their territories, led to violence and bloodshed in Kansas as pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces clashed. The situation in Kansas became known as Bleeding Kansas and served as a grim foreshadowing of the Civil War to come. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who opposed the expansion of slavery, as president in 1860, proved to be the final straw for many Southerners. Fearing that Lincoln's administration would threaten their way of life, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America with Jefferson Davis as their president. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces fired upon Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, marking the beginning of the American Civil War. The war would last for 4 long and bloody years, pitting brother against brother, father against son, in a struggle to determine the fate of the nation. The North, with its larger population, industrial capacity, and more established government, had certain advantages in the war. The South, however, had a strong military tradition, skilled commanders, and the advantage of fighting on familiar territory. Section 5. Turning Points and Triumphs, Key Battles and Events. The Civil War was marked by, numerous battles, some of which proved to be pivotal turning points in the conflict. The Battle of Antietam, fought in Maryland in September of 1862, was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. Although tactically a draw, Antietam was a strategic victory for the Union, as it halted Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army's advance into the North. On January 1, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves held in Confederate territory were to be freed. The Emancipation Proclamation was honestly a watershed moment in American history, as it transformed the Civil War from a conflict to preserve the Union into a fight for human freedom. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought in Pennsylvania in July of 1863, was another turning point in the war. The three-day battle, which resulted in over 50,000 casualties, marked the Confederacy's farthest advance into Northern territory. The Union victory at Gettysburg, coupled with the Union capture of Vicksburg, Mississippi, on the very same day, turned the tide of the war decisively in favor of the North. Section 6. Leaders and Legends Shaping the Course of History. The Civil War forged leaders who shaped America's destiny, including Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, Ulysses S. Grant, and Robert E. Lee. Lincoln preserved the Union with resolve, delivering the iconic Gettysburg Address. Davis led the Confederacy but faced insurmountable challenges. Grant's victories, like Vicksburg, split the Confederacy and secured Union triumphs. Lee's tactical brilliance defined Southern resistance but faltered under Union pressure. Section 7. Voices from the Front, Soldiers' Tales of Courage and Sacrifice. The Civil War was a deeply personal experience for millions of soldiers, enduring unimaginable hardships and witnessing acts of courage and cruelty. Letters and diaries reveal their longing for home, fears of battle, and hopes for peace. Sullivan Ballew's letter to his wife, written days before his death, reflects his unwavering courage and love. Section 8. Beyond the Battlefields, Life on the Home Front. The Civil War had a profound impact on life on the home front, both North and South. Women played a vital role in the war effort, taking on new responsibilities as their husbands, fathers, and sons went off to fight. They worked in factories, producing war materials, ran farms and businesses, and served as nurses, caring for the wounded. The war also led to significant social and political changes. In the North, the war effort fueled industrial growth and led to the expansion of federal power. The Emancipation Proclamation and the enlistment of black soldiers in the Union Army challenged racial prejudices and paved the way for the abolition of slavery and the eventual passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, which granted citizenship, equal protection under the law, and voting rights to African Americans. In the South, the war brought about the destruction of the Confederacy, the end of slavery, and the devastation of its economy and infrastructure. The process of Reconstruction, which followed the war, aimed to rebuild the South and integrate former slaves into society. However, Reconstruction was met with resistance from white Southerners, and the legacy of slavery and racial prejudice would continue to cast a long shadow over the nation. Section 9. A Nation Forged Anew, The Enduring Legacy of the Civil War. The American Civil War was a defining moment in the nation's history. It was a war that tested the very fabric of American democracy, and ultimately decided the question of whether a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal could long endure. The war resulted in the deaths of over 620,000 soldiers, more than all other American wars combined. It left a legacy of physical and emotional scars that would take generations to heal. Yet, from the ashes of this devastating conflict emerged a stronger, more unified nation. The Civil War brought about the end of slavery, reaffirmed the supremacy of the federal government, and led to the expansion of civil rights. It also left an enduring legacy of sacrifice, courage, and the enduring belief in the promise of America. Today, the battlefields of the Civil War stand as solemn reminders of the cost of freedom and the importance of preserving the Union. They serve as sacred ground, where we honor the memory of those who fought and died to preserve the ideals upon which this nation was founded. The American Civil War, though a tragic chapter in our history, ultimately served as a crucible from which a new era of freedom and equality emerged.